Hi, everyone. Welcome to It's a Mystery Podcast. I'm Alexandra Amor, and I'm here today with John Gaspard. Hi, John.
Hello, how you doing?
Very well. How are you?
Good.
Good. Thank you for being here. So, I just want to give everyone a little bit of an introduction before we begin. Oh,
Okay.
and here I've screwed that up and should have opened my Word document. So, I'll be editing this part.
You're having a day, aren't you?
I'm having a day, that is for sure. Here we go. All right. John Gaspard is the author of the Eli Marks mystery series about a working magician who occasionally gets involved in solving murders. In real life, John's not a magician, but he has directed half a dozen low-budget feature films that cost very little and made even less. And that's no small trick, he says. He's also written books on the subject of low-budget filmmaking. His blog, Fast, Cheap Movie Thoughts, was named one of the 50 best blogs for movie makers. On the blog, he occasionally produces a podcast as well called Fast, Cheap Movie Talk. So welcome, John. It's so great to have you here today.
Great to be here.
Oh, good. So why don't you first tell us a little bit about Eli Marks and where you got the idea for that character?
Boy, I wish I knew exactly where it came from. I had finished a novel called The Ripperologists, which is about two competing experts on Jack the Ripper, and wanted to do a series and wasn't quite sure what to do. And then realized that unlike most magicians, just by and I would guess that if I asked you my standard question, which is how many magicians do you know, you would probably say zero or one. Am I
Zero,
right?
yeah. Yeah.
Zero, right. Most people don't know them. And then my next question would be how many live magic shows have you seen in your life?
Zero.
Zero. Okay. Well, the average is three.
Okay.
So it's something everyone's sort of familiar with via culture, but which they haven't personally taken part in. And the people I knew who were magicians were very interesting. And then I got attracted to the names of the tricks, which all sound like book titles. The first book is called The Ambitious Card. Second one's called The Bullet Catch. Third one's called The Miser's Dream. Then one's called The Linking Rings. They all had good mystery title names. And then it was just a question of figuring out, well, if I did one, who would this guy be? And I chose to have a male lead, which is out in a cozy is not a great idea, but I didn't know that. And I would have trouble writing from a female point of view anyway. And using the Ambitious Card as the first title that really jumped out at me, I put together a story that involved the card trick, the Ambitious Card, which is a trick where you pick a card and give it back to the magician that's put in the deck. The deck is mixed, and then no matter what he does, every time he turns over the top card, it's the Ambitious. It's that same card. You put it back in the deck, it's gone. You tear it up, it's gone. I mean, it just keeps turning her up. And I thought, well, that'd be a fun thing if a magician did that trick with somebody, and then that card was found in their body, and then that card continually found on other bodies, which would make him a suspect, and you have to figure out why and how. So that was how the first one started, and it just sort of grew from there.
Okay. Oh, interesting. And yeah, I was going to bring up the idea of the titles because I assumed they were all magic tricks, and I thought they were really great titles, actually. And you mentioned that most cozy mysteries have a female protagonist, but I was reading in one of your reviews, and someone actually said that they liked it, that this was one of the few cozy mysteries that they had found with a male protagonist, and they really appreciated it.
Yes, the people who like that definitely like it, and no one said they disliked it. It's just people kind of go with what they're used to, and they're sort of used to the woman who runs the pet shop who happens to be a detective. That's a little more common in the genre. So,
Yes.
but other than that, it's very much like other cozies in that it's an amateur detective who just stumbles into these things.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And would you say that your worlds of filmmaking and writing collide at all? Did you write the screenplays for your films?
In most cases, yes. And the collision point would be that you get a good idea of how to write a scene and how to keep a story moving if you've written a lot of screenplays, because movies are a lot more forgiving than novels. You can you can kind of go off track a little bit more in a novel and take little side trips that you can't take in a movie. And so you get very used to figuring out what's the fastest way to get into the scene, what's the key things I need to do, what's the best way to get out and leave people wanting to go to the next scene. So in that regard, yeah, it definitely was very good practice.
And the films came first, right? And then the novels later.
Yes, for the most part, I've done a couple films since I started writing novels, a couple really low budget movies. But yeah, I've been making movies since I was 13 years old. So that was definitely the longer stretch for me.
Right. Yeah. Okay. And one of the things I noticed too that your reviewers really liked and appreciated about your books was the character development. And I imagine that's something that's important to you. I know it is for me as a writer and a reader. I really appreciate stories with good character. Is that something that you consciously try to focus on when you're writing?
Yeah, sort of. I don't really think they're terrifically deeply developed. But each book, particularly for my lead character Eli, I try to have him having some sort of I don't know if moral quandary is the right word, but just something he's trying to figure out, which would, I guess, in the end, add some depth to it. In the first book, The Ambitious Card, there's a question of lying to people because magicians lie, and some of them are very, very open about it and say, I'm about to lie to you, and then I lie to you. And he's working with a student who's having a lot of problems doing that and trying to be a magician and that guilt. And so the idea of guilt and lying works into that book quite a bit. Other 3 books after that each have had their own little thing that Eli's dealing with.
Okay, yeah. And I noticed too that he has an ex-wife who's married to a detective. Pardon
Yes.
me. Yes, yeah. So he's got a bit of a past there. And tell us a bit about what's her Deirdre Sutton Hutton.
Yes, the poorly named Deirdre Sutton Hutton. Well, she's actually a character that I lifted from a movie I did years ago, who was a tough. In that case, she was a police detective, but I made her a assistant district attorney in this one, and I needed an in for Eli into the police, either to get information or why was he kept getting involved in murders, and it helped in the very first one that he was the primary suspect. He's only been kind of a minor suspect in other books, but he's the primary suspect in The Ambitious Card. And there was a rivalry and a distrust with her new husband, homicide detective, from who he calls by the full name every time he meets him, Homicide Detective Fred Hutton, Homicide Detective Fred Hutton. So there's not only is always suspicious of him and thinks he's sort of trivial, but there's that, hey, you stole my wife, because he literally did. I mean, they had an affair, and all of a sudden Eli's divorced. He calls it a drive-by divorce. But that divorce then helped give me a reason to put Eli back in his childhood home, which was above the Magic Store at 48th in Chicago in Minneapolis. And that got him back living day to day with his Uncle Harry, who was recently widowed. And so he's sort of his, I wouldn't say his Watson to his Holmes, because Harry's much, much smarter than Eli. But they do make an interesting pair, because Harry is 70-something and is a consummate magician, can work in any form, has done everything in the show business magic form. And Eli is a sort of middling, pretty good corporate magician, has a good 35, 40-minute act. He can make it 50 minutes if he adds knock-knock jokes. He can do some close-up magic. He can do a little bit of kids' magic, but he's nowhere near the specialist that his uncle is. So there's always that tension between the two of them, that Eli doesn't really work as hard as his uncle thinks he should.
Right, yeah. And his uncle has owned the magic shop for the 50 years that it's been going. Is that correct?
Boy, I've never done the chronology on it. He's owned it since its beginnings, but he was married for 50 years, and his wife died several years ago, and they traveled quite a bit. So my guess is he's owned it for at least 40 years. Yes.
Okay.
And it doesn't really exist. If you come to Minneapolis, and I recommend you do, it's a lovely day today. there is everything, other things on the block that are mentioned, the movie theater on one side, the bar Adrian's on the other, both exist. But the magic store I just made up, I stuck it in between. However, I was talking to the owner of the theater recently, and he said, well, no, there was actually a little store right here. And he pointed out a place by the marquee where there had been a door. And he said, yeah, we didn't used to have the candy counter there. And so you could actually, I was a little candy store, went right in there. So there was a store there at some point. I just didn't realize it.
Oh, that's
But
great.
yeah, Harry runs the store for the first 4 books, 3, 4 books. And then he later in the series, Eli runs the store.
Okay, yeah. And you have plans for another book that's coming out later this year, is that right?
The Linking Rings is done, and it will be out in January. I work with a company called Henry Press in Dallas, and they have lots and lots of mysteries. I was, I think, one of the first 6 writers they signed. And unlike many of the other writers, I'm not under contract to write a book. So when I finish it, I hand it in, and then when they have an opening, they slot it. In this case, they don't have an opening until January. And they, I think, would prefer that I would be on contract with that, and I'd have to write a book, and that's not fun. So I prefer to keep it as more of a hobby and not have to write a book.
Oh, okay, yeah. And do you imagine that you would stop if Eli and the other characters aren't interesting to you anymore?
Well, I always said if I did more than 1, I'd do 3. If I did more than 3, I'd do 5. If I did 5, I'd do at least 6. I don't know why I said that, but that's what I always said. I'm writing book number 5 right now, and I have a pretty good idea for book 6. And there's really no end in sight. I mean, the characters there's been changes to characters. Some people have died. Some people are getting married. There'll be more going on. But, as long as I can think of a magic trick that I like the title of and a problem to get Eli into, I can see going on for a while. I've also done a couple short stories with him we did one as a promotional piece that I think I sent you the information on, The Invisible Assistant. People can read that or listen to the audiobook of that to get an idea of it. And then there's one coming out next year called The Last Customer, which is in an anthology. I don't know if the anthology's been named yet, in honor of the local bookstore owner here, Once Upon a Crime Books. Gary, the owner of that, died last year. So we're putting out a book about bookstores and customers. And Eli has a short story in that.
Oh, nice. And do you enjoy working in that short form? Yeah. It must be kind of tricky for a mystery novel or mystery story.
You broke up there, and all I heard was, did you enjoy?
Okay. Yeah, do you enjoy...
Oh, do I enjoy working in short form?
Yeah.
Short stories are hard.
Yeah,
they're hard. I remember, I think it was Lawrence Block, the writer, said, write a novel before you write a short story, because it's a lot easier to write a novel, I think, a good novel than a good short story. It's a really tight form, and you've got to have a really good idea what you're doing. So the 2 that I've done been both okay. I've had other requests for it, and if I don't have the right story, I can't. For some reason, a novel's easier. I mean, I guess it's like a feature-length film. It's easier for me to tackle.
Yes, yeah, I can imagine that, and especially with a mystery which needs all the loose ends to be tied up by the time it's over. I mean, some short stories aren't like that, and you can be left not knowing what happened. But with a mystery, you can't do that.
Right. Yeah. There's a lot of threads.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. Let's see. What else did I want to ask? When you're thinking about the story, you mentioned that you like to have a magic trick to base it on. And so have you learned more magic tricks or more magic as you've gone along and written these books?
Yes. The first book, The Ambitious Card, took a long time to write because I had to learn a bunch of stuff. I had to really get up to speed. I don't have to know as much as a working magician. I just need to know more than the average person. And as luck would have it, the average person doesn't know a whole lot about magic. So that helps. But I had to make sure that any of the magic presented in the book, either both A, was correct, that is, the way it's presented is the way a trick is actually done, because I hate things that involve magicians where they do the impossible. So it had to be real and something you could do. And B, it couldn't give away how it was done. So that with very few exceptions, I don't ever really give away how a trick is done. You might get kind of a general idea. There's a psychic in a mentalist psychic in the first book, The Ambitious Card, where I do give away a couple things there because he's kind of dishonest, and I felt okay with that. But I had to do a lot of research. I actually studied with a local magician named Suzanne and learned how to do an ambitious card. I thought I'll learn the title trick for every book. So I learned how to do a pretty good ambitious card routine and kind of came up with my own, which turns up in later books as Eli's trick. And then I got to the second book and decided to call it the bullet catch, which is when you fire a gun. Actually, an audience member comes up and fires a gun at you from across the stage, and you catch the bullet in your mouth. And that's when I decided that I didn't have to learn every trick, because that's just too dangerous.
Yeah, that sounds like a pretty advanced trick. Holy cow. Yeah.
Yeah, more than a dozen magicians have died performing that trick. So,
No.
yeah, yes, yes.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Wow. And magic sort of strikes me as something that's like it's got a whole community and a world of its own. You know, when you meet people who are really into magic, they're really into it. And it's not, as you said right off the top at the beginning of the show, it's not something that a person encounters every day. Like I don't know, I've never met a single magician. Do you have a lot of magicians in your life now, or have you become a part of that community?
I have actually become a bit of part of that community. The woman I took lessons from, Suzanne, who is world renowned. She approached me after I went to see her at a local show, and we were talking about other. It was a restaurant show that she'd done, and we talked about shows in other cities. There's a weekly show in Chicago called Magic Cabaret. There's a weekly show in New York. Los Angeles has a Magic Castle. London has Magic Circle, but Minneapolis doesn't have a place where you could come and just see magic. There are some magicians who work in restaurants who can work at your table for 3.5 or 4 minutes. Or if you happen to be working for a company that has an annual party and a magician shows up, but no place to see really good magicians. And so we've started a monthly program called Sunday Night Magic at a local theater. And because of her connections and the people she knows, we're able to get really good magicians in. And we're doing it as just a limited test, but so far it's gone really well. And I've met a lot of really interesting magicians. And then when my wife and I travel, if there's magic wherever we're going, we always go see shows there. So I see way more. In fact, I had one magician tell me I see too much magic. He said, you've seen enough. You don't need to see anymore. So yeah, I way more than I probably should.
Yes. Yeah. And you mentioned that writing is more of a hobby for you. It's not your primary occupation. So do you have a writing routine, or do you just write when the spirit moves you, or how does that work?
A little of both. I take notes all the time. I have a pad by the bedside, which I use because that's when the best ideas seem to come, just before you fall asleep or just when you wake up. And I'm always sending myself emails, and then I just assemble the notes into a long Word document. Excuse me. And then when I feel like I have enough to where I know exactly where I'm going for at least halfway of the book, and I know where it ends, and because I always know the from the middle point to the end, it's going to change anyway, so I don't have to get that too locked down. Then I'll start writing. My wife teaches ballet a couple nights a week, so rather than I don't really watch sports, so those nights I might sit down and write a bit here or there. But it's, Stephen King always talks about walking around with a book under his arm, and if you're standing in line at a movie or a store or something, he will read. And I don't do that with writing, but it's kind of close. I mean, I'll come up with an idea for a paragraph and just say it into my phone and email it to myself. So it really is happening. You never know when or where I'll be writing something.
Yes, yeah. And so doing that, how long does it take you to write a book, would you say? Like a year? Did I freeze up again?
You did. Can you tell
Okay.
by the look at my face?
I did. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I have that RCA dog look where I just kind of like, what?
That's
Usually
right.
when it freezes up, though, it'll unfreeze, and then I get the whole question. So
Did you catch that one
I'll
about how?
just wait patiently.
Yeah, yeah,
I did.
exactly.
Nope.
No, okay. I'm just wondering with that approach of using the little bits of time you have, how long does it take you to write a book?
It varies, but usually a year to year and a half from beginning to end.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's. I'm not fast. Most people say, let's write a novel in a month. Good for you.
Well, I think they're also doing it 8 hours a day. So,
Yes, I suppose so. And I'm not. I'm just doing a little bit here, a little bit there. And where you run into things where, I'll find a scene where Eli's alone in the magic shop and he is, and you go, he is what? Okay, he's trying out a card trick. What is he trying out? Well, then I got to go down that rabbit hole of, okay, he's a pretty good magician. So what would he be trying to do that a pretty good magician reading this would go, yeah, that's what I would do in my spare time. And so it's that sort of stuff with little bits of detail. The was it the third book, The Miser's Dream. Um, Eli sees a body out his apartment window. There's a movie theater next door, and he can see kind of into the projection booth of the movie theater, and he sees a body lying on the floor of the projection booth. So there's a lot of stuff with the theater manager and Eli in that book, and the theater manager is doing this thing where she combines 2 or 3 movies into like double or triple features, but she only does ones that sound good on the marquee, like Guess Who's Coming to My Dinner with Andre. So that's 2 movies. Guess Who's Coming to Dinner with Andre. And you laugh, and that's nice. But it took months for me to just going, okay, because I had to have lists of them, of him just naming off what she's showing. And so that sort of thing, you just kind of you wait, and then it appears, and you quickly write it down. And I still have lists of stuff we never got around to. We might come back to that.
yeah. Yeah. And have you had feedback from magicians, I guess?
Yes, a couple really prominent ones have either told me they like them, or I've heard from other magicians that they've recommended that they read them, which is really, really nice. I did explain to the publisher early on, because they said, "Oh, great, that's a built-in audience, magicians," and I said, "No, this is a book for mystery lovers. If you like cozy mysteries, you'll like this book. If you're a magician and you don't like that kind of book, you're not going to like it."
Yeah.
And people don't necessarily want to read fiction about their profession, really. But the ones who have read it have been very complimentary and have pointed out what I got right. And so far, no one's pointed out anything wrong, because I do have sort of a who read drafts to once I sent out an email to a bunch of them saying, what's the most common thing that goes wrong in your act? Because I needed something to go wrong for Eli, and a couple of them wrote back and said, nothing goes wrong. It's my act. I've been doing it for 20 years. But for the most part, they're very helpful.
Oh, good. Oh, that's great. Now, listen, it froze up a little bit at my end just there.
Okay.
So maybe we could start where you were saying, I think you
Sure.
were starting to say that you did have some people that you can get feedback from.
Yes. So to make sure the magic's right, I do have magician friends who are willing to read the manuscripts and point out if I've got a term wrong, if I'm stating a trick wrong, if I'm saying something in the wrong order. That doesn't happen quite as often. If historically I have something wrong, there's a famous story about a magician named Max Malini who made a block of ice appear on a top of a table by taking at dinner. They've been eating for 90 minutes, and he picked up his hat, and there was a block of ice underneath it. And I got that slightly wrong, not so wrong that a person reading it would notice, but a magician would have gone, no, that's not how he did it like this. So it's great to have that set of experts I can go to make sure that I'm getting everything right. And I have emailed them questions, and their answers have, I once emailed, is there anything that's gone wrong in your act? And a couple wrote back and said, no, nothing ever goes wrong in my act. I'm an expert. But yeah, it's great to have that cadre of people helping me out.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And so I notice we're getting close to the end of our time, so I just want to ask you one more question. Is there
Sure.
anything that you've learned about magic that has really surprised you that you didn't know before?
Yes, the biggest surprise I've noticed, and I'll tell it as a story of my friend Suzanne, who's now my friend Suzanne. She's my teacher. She was on a show called Penn and Teller Fool Us, which is a magic show where the magicians Penn and Teller have different magicians come on and they do tricks for them. And if Penn and Teller can figure out how it's done, you don't win. If they can't figure it out, then you get an award. And it's very prestigious within the magic community to fool Penn and Teller. And my friend Suzanne did. She has a lovely trick with a Band-Aid. And she fooled them, and she was telling me about it. And she said at the end of the story, do you want to know how the trick is done? Now, maybe 10 years ago, I would have said, yes, how's it done? But I found that more often than not, the answer of how it's done is nowhere near as interesting as the mystery of how it's done. So I didn't ask. She didn't tell me how that was done. And I've spent less and less time trying to figure out how tricks are done now, because it's just the solution is never as interesting as the mystery they presented. So.
Yeah, oh, that's so interesting to hear. And you know what? I just had an epiphany myself. I didn't realize that magicians could invent their own tricks. That's probably going to sound really stupid, but I just assumed magicians were all sort of doing tricks that had already been invented, but it sounds like they can, just like comedians, they can create their own material.
Yes, and that's a big issue within the magic community. Magicians who act like a cover band, just doing everyone else's stuff, and magicians who create new effects. Now, there's really nothing. I mean, they would tell me there's nothing really new, but there's new ways of presenting it. But all the concepts are still there. It's just people who find twists on them. But yeah, people are, and those are the ones who fool Penn and Teller, are the ones who are doing something that they've gone back into the history books, found something, found a way to update it, and then they can't figure out how it's done.
Oh, very cool. That's amazing. Well, thank you so much for speaking to me today, John. I really appreciate it. So why don't you let everyone know where they can find your books?
Happy to do it.
Oh, good.
Yes. Well, you can find the Eli Marks Mysteries, on Amazon or Barnes & Noble. Just search for Eli Marks or for John Gaspard. They are the first two books in the series are also on audible.com as audiobooks, read by the incomparable Jim Cunningham, who gets great rave reviews because he does a really wonderful job, really brings it to life. And then I believe I sent you the links for how to get the Invisible Assistant, which people can download as a short story ebook or also as an audio short story from the links, and see if they like Eli Marks and his world.
Exactly. Right. And I'll put links to those in the notes. And we should also mention, too, that the Ambitious card, which I bought today, is 99 cents.
It is 99 cents as an ebook. Yep. Go for it.
Yep. Great. Well, thanks once again, John. It's really been great chatting with you.
No problem. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.